Good morning, Sunday morning for science. That's a stretch, but I see that this is a very international audience, and that's actually very nice because we are still looking for global collaborators on this study that we started in Germany and Austria. The title is Who Believes in Homo Deus? And what's happening here is the following. I'm very interested in our idea of man. In German, it's called Menschenbild. What do we actually believe about ourselves, and what do we believe of what we become with the technology? It's in German. We have this wonderful word for it. It's called Menschenbild, and then I try to translate the idea of man, and then women jump at me and say, "Why don't you call it idea of humanity or something like that?" Right? So a couple of years ago, I had a PhD student, and I said, "Let's try to measure it. Can we actually measure what people believe about themselves in their future?" And it was very, very difficult to start with, because when you try out, you look for questions about mankind, it just didn't work. And so about 3 years ago, 3 years ago, I discovered a book by a scholar called Tamar Sharon, a PhD from she published her PhD as a book on the nature of human beings, and in that book, Tamar Sharon pulled out a lot of the beliefs that are actually circulating around the future, and I will present many of you today. And with this book, I started to say, okay, let's try to develop a questionnaire that actually captures all those individual beliefs, test it, and then make a global study and look at what people believe in everywhere in the world. Yeah. So this is a little bit the story. Normally, an ordinary person or somebody who is just entering the scene regards the idea of man pretty in a bipolar way. So there is this one class of people that we might be calling transhumanists. Plessner had the word, said there is an utopian perspective, an engineering perspective on human life. And very, very roughly so, there is another camp as well. There are a lot of people who are super concerned, Michael Sandel, Habermas, they're called bioconservatives. And they stand in very sharp contrast to this utopian engineering perspective on human life. Simply said, a normal journalist would be having this bipolar view. But, of course, as you all know, being experts in those fields, there is a much, much more distinguished, almost, I would say, landscape of beliefs. And Tamar Sharon starts to pull this out. So you see here 3 protagonists. You see it's already getting a little bit more complex. Bioconservatism, to start here on the right, is called by Tamar Sharon dystopian posthumanism. And Michael Sandel is perhaps one of the key figures here, and he says, why do we have this talk about changing human nature? Human nature is a blessing. Humans are vulnerable. Humans should not be re-engineered. It's a God-given gift. Yeah, humanity. So that's one important perspective. And then there are indeed distinguished perspectives on the future. It's not just the utopian perspective of engineering man, but there are liberal posthumans, as Tamar Sharon calls it, and radical posthumans. And I will delve deeply into the differences between them in a second. Ray Kurzweil, certainly with his talk about the singularity and that there will be an evolutionary jump at some point, and that we will enhance ourselves through technology. And technology is always better than human evolution, is on one part, on one side. And then there is Donna Haraway. We are all born as cyborgs. We are already cyborgs. That's radical posthumanism. I will delve deeply into those. I will show you the distinct differences between those perspectives in a second. But one really, really crucial dimension where people diverge from each other's perspectives is on the question, do we humans have an essence? And this is why I bring in this, I don't know whether it's playing here, but it's a little video actually where I show the ocean and where this, as a radical posthumanism, believes that we have always anthropologically been embedding technology, and we have been changing already from Stone Age through entire human history. Technology has always been a part of us. And it's absolutely natural as we advance with technology that we are continuing to embed technology into us. It's nothing special. And now the question, though, is, so those who believe that say, of course, human essence. You cannot talk about human essence because human essence is always a dialogue with technology. It's always integrated. So what is essence? But of course, the people like Michael Sandel, the bioconservatives, would say, now, of course, humans have an essence. The technology is a threat. If you put technology into the body, you lose your human essence. So they obviously totally believe in this vulnerable essence. And it's not that he thinks that technology has always been part of us. No, there is nature, there is God-given nature, and it's biological, and technology will change something. And he doesn't want that. He doesn't want that. So he's on that camp. And then there are transhumanists who vary on this perspective again, because they seem to be arguing in many of their texts that, oh, there is technology, and humans will use it. And we will use it, and we won't be hurt. So our essence will not necessarily change because we will be masters. We will just use it and for our benefit. So this core question about is there a human essence or not is really important to distinguish the different perspectives on our post-human perspectives. But there is even more. Yeah? So, and my talk will now just very quickly give you an overview of some core belief aspects. And keep in mind this word aspects, because I found out that in this talking about the future, this belief, whether human has an essence or not, is just one aspect. It's the most important aspect to distinguish the belief domains, but it's just one belief aspect. There are other belief aspects, and as you will see, I developed a questionnaire to ask people exactly about those different belief aspects. So what are these beyond essence? In the transhumanist literature, or what Sharon calls liberal posthumanism, she says, and she has a lot of authors and literature sources here that she brings together. She says the core belief aspects of liberal posthumanism, where she includes transhumanism, are that biology has left humans suboptimal. There is a general notion in the transhumanist movement that perhaps humans are not happy and good as they are. They often refer to the body as being mush and just water and so on. And that technology, there is a strong belief in technology, that technology is actually superior and that we can overcome biological constraints through technology, And in this overcoming of biological constraints is also this belief that humans are independent from external reality and essentially unalterable, no? And also not so vulnerable. Also transhumanists are not afraid of technology. I'm personally very afraid of technology. Yeah? I don't put too much stuff in my body. I perceive myself as extremely vulnerable. Even when people get blood from my body, I hate it. Yeah. So, but other people are much less sensitive here. Ray Kurzweil takes 200 pills a day, as is being said. So she doesn't seem to be afraid of pharmaceuticals, obviously. So this is a little bit. So when you believe yourself to be autonomous, you're relatively invulnerable, you're essentially unalterable, and this is very important for the philosophical debate, humans are believed to manipulate technologies, and technology is an instrument. But, and this is the the difference to radical posthumanism, is where technology is not an instrument, but it is also changing us back. Don Edith said we shape technology and technology shapes us back. And so in radical posthumanism, there are nuances of difference to the liberal posthumanism and transhumanism. So here you see, I actually left on the slide, biology has always naturally been integrated. I already talked about that. We've always been cyborgs, the famous quote by Donna Haraway. Technologies are part of human evolution. There is a composable molecularity. Humans are dependent on their external reality and essentially alterable. So here you see the difference to the liberal posthumanism. The human does not exist. That is a socially constructed binary norm because we've always changed with technology, and they are autonomous and relatively vulnerable. And see on the right side, you see here that all these beliefs, I really say, we as humans, we hold these beliefs. We believe that something is true. And in Plato's definition of knowledge, that knowledge is a true justified belief, whether you like that definition or not. It's very interesting that knowledge, truth, and our beliefs are somehow linked. No? So if we strongly believe in something, we believe it's true. And this is important for my measurement instrument that I'm coming to in a second. So you see here the nuances, differences of radical posthumanism represented by Donna Haraway. And then you see the Michael Sandel, bioconservatives, what Sharon calls dystopic posthumanism. So technologies are not part of human evolution. There is no composable molecularity, also humans are one, not composable. Humans essentially are unalterable and have an integral essence. The human is not a socially constructed binary norm, and humans are not autonomously and relatively vulnerable. So who's right? Who holds the truth? And so what I did, seen this, and when you read the book by Tamar Sharon, you see a lot of sources, authors that for decades have been writing about all those dimensions. And what I did, I tried to accumulate them all, extracted them mostly from her book and the sources that she's been using, because I think it was the most fantastic summary of portraying future humanity from philosophical and sociological sources. And I developed a measurement instrument, a statistical instrument, a questionnaire, to speak simply, and I took 33 this kind of belief aspects. And I formulated 114 questions, that would be capturing those belief aspects. Let me give you an example here. There is this critical conservative posthuman perspective, and one aspect aspect of it is that there is an alienation from biological nature through technology. And then we asked 3 questions to people, or we had 300 Austrians and 300 Germans. And we asked them, for example, these 3 questions that you see here on the side. So we asked them, technological optimization of the human body negatively affects human individuality, or positive technological improvements of humans does not compensate for its potential cost of individuality. No? Oder technological enhancement negatively changes our biological nature. So we have 3 questions here, and that when you design questionnaires, when you design measurement instruments, it's an art. It's a rigorous scientific skill. Yeah, so you have to pay attention to so many small things so that you don't influence the people who are going to answer the question. That's why, for example, I underline here that we say some voices say. We don't say a lot of people believe. Because then perhaps if a lot of people believe, I will also cross that I believe in it, right? So we say some voices believe, and we give also examples of what this question is about so that people relate to it. And then we had a 7-point scale, and we tell people the focus here when you answer is not a personal wish or preference, but your assessment of reality. So we ask people here explicitly to say, tell us, do you think to what extent these questions are true or false? So this is the scale we developed. Then we had these 600 Austrians and Germans. We selected them through a media agency. So we had a professional agency that selected Germans and Austrians socially representative with different ages, with different professions, and also with different levels of education. And the only choice we made is that we only question people that at least have an A level, so that have an Abitur, yeah, Matura. And what you then do statistically is, so you have this huge chunk of data, 600 people answering your question, answering to 114 questions, and you run them through a statistical analysis. I don't know, perhaps not so many of you necessarily do statistical analysis all the time, which is why I present it here more verbally on my slides. But what you do is you have those 114 answers and of the people's beliefs, and you correlate. You look at what correlates, how do answers correlate between each other, and then you do a factor analysis and you try to discern belief structures in this way. So now I show you the results. Yeah. Through the statistical analysis, we can also challenge whether Tamasha Ron's threefold categorization of posthuman beliefs is true or not. We see it in the data. Yeah, or we are pretty close, we're getting closer to reality if we ask people on the ground. So what does it mean here, this slide? So there was 3 questions on an inevitable singularity. Do you really believe that there is this point in time where, the superintelligence takes off? Or technology is superior to biology. You remember that was a very important belief aspect, yeah? Is technology superior to biology? Will there be, or is there going to be a superhuman immortality? And then, do parents have an enhancement responsibility? Is self-optimization a moral necessity? Is technology enabler of more equality? So you see here the first, everything that I categorized as a transhuman perspective. These were beliefs that highly correlated. That when somebody, for example, said technology is superior to biology, he or she was very likely to also believe in an inevitable singularity, and was very likely also to believe in some future superhuman immortality. So you see a little bit how people flock together in their belief structures. And the first belief structure we indeed identified, I called it then later the transhuman perspective. But it was absolutely clear statistically that this transhuman perspective is different statistically and loads statistically distinctly from a general tech liberal perspective, which is much more a political perspective. So, for example, questions going in the direction like, should people have a freedom from political structures to optimize their bodies, freedom from governmental interference, and controlled technical self-determination. For example, now a lot of people do gender transitions, yeah? And there are people who are fiercely really saying, this is really my personal body, and if I make this technical decision, it's my decision. People flocking around those beliefs are not necessarily transhumanists. And not every transhumanist is necessarily someone who subscribes to a general tech liberal perspectives. Sometimes these things go together. But in terms of belief structures, these are clearly two distinct factors. And then there was a third factor, which is grayed out here a little bit because it was statistically not as strong, but it was there, clearly there. And that is this transformative humanity perspective. This question, does technology have a profound transformative effect on our nature? And do we actually create an entirely new species through our technology? Remember this discussion about human essence. While the exact question to human essence seems to have been so complicated that it kind of didn't load on the factors, so we had to get rid of it. We couldn't continue using it in the statistics. This factor, transformative humanity perspective, is really a little bit going into this direction. And then we come to the radical posthumanism, also what Donna Haraway basically, this pillar. So what I found is that this essential belief here, human technology integrated evolution. People who believe in a human technology integrated evolution also believe that there should be a liberation from socially constructed binary norms. And there is an ongoing reconstructing of postmodern self. Yeah? And these people, because it was so interesting that these political, and that's why it's interesting, fascinating that you work on politics, right? So there is this political aspect to that. Many of the questions like liberation from socially constructed binary norms, this is a political argument. And it is people who believe in that are simply in one camp here, yeah? They go together, but I added to Tamar Sharon's labeling of the group, political. And then comes the bioconservatives, blessing of the given, please have only, I believe that only medical cures should be done instead of experimentation. Then something I called the Gattaca effect, the threat that empathy and solidarity will get lost in a society where some people can afford medication for 10,000 euros a day and others can't, yeah? Or humanity cannot be manufactured at will. Humanity is vulnerable. Technology leads to an alienation from biological nature. So this conservative, and now I don't call it dystopian or something like that, because I think that's too much bias in the labeling of the group. I simply call it critical, conservative, posthuman perspective. So, and with this, we have created a questionnaire that is statistically reliable to be reused again in Austria and Germany, but also perhaps in Saudi Arabia or in, I don't know, Italy or in Japan or in China. And what would be very interesting, and I'm really asking around here to you as colleagues, if you are working in different cultures, you could be using this questionnaire. We have an online version. It has to be translated into the regional language, very carefully so, but double-back translation is used. And then we can run the study and see whether, for example, Arabs, Chinese, Iranians, Americans, perhaps they are very different. And what I'd find fascinating, the data was collected right before GPT was introduced. So I'm wondering already whether in Austria and Germany, people's perspective have changed. So this is, and now I'm coming to the end of my talk. So one thing is that this statistical tool, which has statistically very good factors, so it's a highly reliable statistical instrument. That's not always the case when you try to develop a measurement instrument. I was, of course, curious to see, so beyond the beliefs, statistical loading, what did people answer? What do they believe in? Yeah. And remember, we had a 1 to 7 point scale. And so on average, and then you take only the questions that are, for example, characterizing the critical posthuman perspective. And to those questions where the critical posthuman perspective comes out, Germans and Austrians have a mean to answer with 5.15 out of a 7-point scale, which means that they have a very high support of critical, conservative, and let's call it again bioconservative perspective. The transhuman perspective sees 3 on average, so much less, so average is 4 on a 1 to 7 point scale. 4 is the neutral point and 3 is below neutrality. So there is, and radical, as Donna Haraway, we are all cyborgs and we are all developing this technology anyways for the whole time, and this will go on just smoothly with putting nanotechnology in the bodies and all of that. No, people don't believe in it. 2.8. So you see, while we maybe very often here in theoretical, science-driven university environments where we think about the future and we speculate about opportunities, when you ask ordinary people in ordinary jobs and you ask them what they believe is true, you see that there is much more conservatism around than many of the people believe who are in the future studies. And then you see, you can do for any one of these 3 dimensions, you can say, okay, let's just have a look at those people who are going beyond the neutral point, also who are kind of supportive of bioconservatism, of transhumanism, and so on. So you look at only those who are clearly in their beliefs supporting the respective position. And if I take those, I have an average percentage of participants supporting the posthuman narrative. 66% of the people believe in the bioconservatism, 25% believe in transhumanism, and 20% in this radical posthuman Donna Haraway scenario. Okay, 25% transhumanism, as some of you know who have invited me here, and Mr. Sorgner knows as well, I'm very interested in understanding the transhumanist movement and what it is about and why it's there. So I had also quite a lot of questions that I answered to the people answering the questionnaire. So the age and the education and some personality and psychological variables. So they answered, I think, I don't know how many, but we had quite a few socio-demographic and psychological variables that we also queried from the people answering the questionnaire. And what you can then do, you can do a regression analysis. So you take, for example, and this is what we did here, just going back, these people here who have on average are clearly transhumans or clearly bioconservatives, we have those as a dependent variable, and then we look at their sex, age, country, psychological variables. And I can summarize, you already look at me because of the time. If you can't read the statistics, transhumanists are rather male, younger, from Germany, compare themselves to others, see more professional messages a day, use technology more frequently, and have more medical stimulus intake. The most important thing here is, from my perspective, compare themselves to others. It's a psychological construct, an inferiority complex. 25% are transhumans, and they tend to have those traits. And then statistically you also see the others, but I think this was because the title is Who Believes in Homo Deus? Also Harari is a transhumanist. In his Homo Deus book it's absolutely clearly shown. We did an analysis of that. And this is basically who is buying into it. Yeah. Thank you.